thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Russ Outcall, and as Lynn said, I serve on the board of directors of ICCT, and I serve as the secretary. And it's a real pleasure to moderate this program tonight. We're going to feature Donna Dew and Shay Reinberg of the Citizens Climate Lobby. And they're going to be discussing some legislation tonight that would attach a price on fossil fuels and other sources of greenhouse gases, which are so-called carbon fees, which then pay out to the public in form of dividends. Citizens Climate Lobby has been promoting attaching a price to carbon to reflect the environmental cost of fossil fuels since they were founded in 2007, and they're a leading voice for this approach to fighting climate change. Well, I was going to cover some housekeeping items, but I think Lynn and Tosif got most of them. Just a reminder, we will be recording tonight, so if you don't want to be seen, you can turn off your camera. And if you want to rename and post your pronouns, you can do that by hovering over your image, and you'll see 3 dots appear, and you'll see a rename choice come up, and then you can put that in there. We won't be taking any questions during the presentations, but we'll have a question and answer period immediately following. But as questions occur to you, please capture them and place them in the chat, and we'll pass those along to Don and Shay during the Q&A. We expect tonight's meeting to last about an hour and a half in total, so sit back, relax, and hope you learned something about this very important topic. Now, I do have a couple of other items here, or one item, and then the bios for Don and Shay. We wanted at ICCT to make you aware that North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light has put together a petition to Duke Energy that they are circulating, basically trying to push Duke to accelerate their move to renewable energy and a net zero profile, emissions profile. We endorse that at ICCT, and we've made it easy for you. We've placed a link on our website so that you can review the petition and you can sign on to support that. And we encourage you to do that. So now a brief word of introduction about our 2 speakers. Donald Dew is a native of North Carolina and a graduate of Appalachian State University with a degree in ecology and environmental biology. He spent over a decade advocating for renewable energy and climate action on climate change. And he founded the first Citizens Climate Lobby chapter in North Carolina in 2011 and is their program director. He's given a number of lectures at local universities, and he resides in Durham with his wife and an adopted beagle. Shay Reinberg is a senior in high school from Chapel Hill. Since joining Citizens Climate Lobby in July of 2019, she's led the Triangle Youth Team. She's also lobbied her representatives, as well as the Chief Environmental Officer of Microsoft with the Citizens Climate Lobby group. And she's made a number of presentations to CCL volunteers across the nation. Shay hopes to study environmental science and policy in college when she graduates. So that's our introduction. And so Don and Shay, I'll turn the program over to you.
All right, let me just share my screen. Okay, there we go. So as I begin, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I'm going to be using the chat feature throughout the presentation, so you know that that will be a place for you to participate in if you would like, but please keep yourself muted. Thank you, Russ, for the introductions, and thank you everyone for being here. I am Shay, and I'm excited, so excited to be speaking with you all today about national climate policy and advocacy. I'm going to introduce a popular piece of legislation that we are confident will pass this year in 2021 and what you all can do to support it. All right, let's get started. First, I'd like to introduce the organization that we represent. I'm a volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby, and Donna Dew works with Citizens Climate Lobby and will also be able to answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL for short, as we like to call it, is a grassroots advocacy organization focused on national policies to address climate change. And one of the unique features of CCL is that we support bipartisan legislation to combat growing emissions. And the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is one of the many bipartisan legislations that we advocate for. The youth team I lead here in the Triangle is called the Triangle Youth Team within the Raleigh-Durham chapter of CCL. All members of our youth team have experience lobbying our representatives, and with the team, I have given a number of presentations, including educational ones to classrooms during the pandemic online. Citizens Climate Lobby has many youth teams across the country like ours, as well as a national youth team. As youth, CCL's empowering an optimistic approach by building political will to address climate change draws us. So to give you an overview of what I'm going to be talking about in the next half hour or so, first I am going to address climate change and climate justice as it relates to us today. Next, I'm going to talk about a solution to help combat climate change, and that is national climate policy. I will then explain a specific piece of bipartisan climate legislation that was in the House of Representatives in the past Congress, and finally, what its future is for 2021. So I lived in Chapel Hill for almost my whole life, up until this summer when my family moved to Wilmington, where I'm calling in from right now. In my freshman year of high school, I took an environmental science class and learned about all the different environmental issues that our planet is facing. And I was concerned and I wanted to make changes and adapt a more sustainable lifestyle. It was not until my sophomore year of high school when I especially became concerned about climate change. Climate change became a constant anxiety for me, so much so that I really wanted to do more than be sustainable, but make climate activism a part of my daily life. I looked into joining an advocacy organization, and that is when I found Citizens Climate Lobby. And I joined because Citizens Climate Lobby is laser focused on a climate solution. And there are so many different opportunities for me as a high school volunteer to advocate, like lobbying in Washington, D.C. or online, tabling when it was safe to do so, learning about policy, publishing a letter to the editor, and giving presentations through outreach like this. In my experience with advocating with Citizens Climate Lobby, I've really appreciated our values, including diversity, integrity, being nonpartisan, having a focus, optimism, relationships, and empowerment, all of which are clearly emanated by CCL's leadership and in the community. I volunteer with CCL because I see a future of a livable, healthy planet in which we have transitioned from fossil fuel usage and sustainable lifestyles are habitual. So I would like to just think I'd like you to think about these questions, and please start sharing your responses in the chat as I continue with this section on climate change. Why do you want to solve the climate challenge? What are your motivations? Who are you doing this for? What are you doing this for? What inspired you to join the Interfaith Creation Care? And again, please share your responses in the chat. I want you to think about this because as I have come to experience myself, sometimes the issue becomes so overwhelming, so hard and difficult. But taking myself back to my own reasons for wanting to advocate in the first place helps to re-energize myself to carry on. We'll just take a moment as you all share your responses in the chat. Grandchildren, future generations, non-human lives, grandchildren. Awesome, thank you all for sharing your responses. Okay, so when thinking about climate change, it is important that we understand its impacts on a local level and how we are affected right here at home in North Carolina. So here are some of the facts that we face. By the mid-century, There will be an increase in dangerous heat days from 10 to 60 days annually, and that is based on the National Weather Service Heat Index. By the mid-century, 4,800,000 people, or half of our state's population, will be at an elevated risk of wildfires. By the mid-century, over 450,000 people will live in areas with an elevated risk of inland flooding. And these are just some of the many consequences of climate change affecting North Carolina to consider, and those are just some of them. The pandemic and climate change have many similarities, which I like to point out. They both affect human health, as climate change creates warmer and wetter environments in which vector-borne diseases thrive in, and climate change also increases pollution. Another similarity is that COVID-19 and climate change both cause economic destruction. Climate change through loss of infrastructure and loss of natural resources and species. And finally, both COVID-19 and climate change need immediate action in order to mitigate the effects that they have on our lives. This data displays the racial disparities that have come about during this pandemic, noting that this was as of August 18. It includes that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are more likely to die from getting COVID-19. The CDC has cited some social factors, including discrimination, that have led to these disparities and deaths of the virus. Health and healthcare, occupation and job conditions, income and wealth, education, neighborhood and physical environment. I wanted to show you this because the pandemic is one of the many ways that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately impacted by a global issue. And it's not due to genetics, but to social factors. Also, similarly to the pandemic, climate change disproportionately impacts marginalized groups such as women, children, people of color, and low-income communities due to the same social factors and discrimination. A 2017 paper by the UN on climate inequality found that disadvantaged groups suffer disproportionately from both direct and indirect climate effects of climate hazards, and described climate change inequality as a vicious cycle. Some of the direct effects on these groups include destruction of crops and property by flooding. And the indirects include higher insurance premiums, higher food costs. Socioeconomically disadvantaged communities also have fewer assets. So whenever a climate disaster strikes, they are less capable of recovery, and they are also less likely to receive adequate funding for recovery. The communities impacted are not only those found in developing countries, but also marginalized groups here in the United States. So in conclusion, climate change is not just a scientific or economic issue. It is also an issue of social justice and human rights. Okay, so that was all very maybe overwhelming or very sad news, but here's just a quick little fun fact. Multiple choice question, you can put your multiple choice letter answer in the chat box. What species was the first to go extinct due to climate change? Was it A, Tasmanian tiger, B, the golden toad, C, Steller's sea cow, or D, White's dolphin? I'll give it a couple of seconds as you all guess.
Shay, this is Lynn Lyle. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you consistently. Sometimes we hear you perfectly, and then it sort of blends out a little bit and comes right back in again. It might be that it has to do with the direction of you speaking into your mic. I don't know. Do you know?
Okay. I'm not sure if possible. It could be because I'm screen sharing at the same time. If we want to try, I sent the presentation to see if you'd like to screen share. That might minimize.
Tosi, what do you think?
That shouldn't be the reason for the sound distortion, but one thing we could do, Shay, if you have the invitation to the meeting, there's a phone number on there as well. If you'd like to call into the meeting, and then that way the sound could come through your phone. That is one solution we could do. Yeah, if you would like to try that.
Okay, so are you able to hear me fine right now?
Yeah, it's still a little bit of that distortion.
Okay, I can try that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna play the video on the next slide as I work that out.
Great.
So this is a 2-minute video created by Citizens Climate Lobby recently that really encapsulates who we are, what we are working towards, and our attitude in this movement. And I'll also give you another preview of what I'm going to be talking about next. So I hope you enjoy.
Shay, you're muted, I think.
Sorry, I'm
Not entered any number.
I think she's joining via her mobile device right now.
okay. I'm going to join through my phone. I apologize for this. In the meantime, there's actually another video on the next slide, so I will play this.
What if we could reduce carbon pollution at a lower cost and with fewer government restrictions than we have now? Our current strategy is to regulate who, what, or how energy can be used, either through emissions rules that favor politically connected groups or through costly subsidies and mandates that often fail to achieve their goals. But another, more flexible way is to tax carbon emissions. A carbon tax would automatically encourage consumers and producers to shift toward energy choices that emit less carbon, whatever those options may be, because they would cost less relative to high carbon options. Economists call this an efficient solution because those who create costs would pay for them instead of shifting it onto others. This carbon tax could be made revenue neutral and more fair to all income groups by taking all revenue collected and redistributing it to American taxpayers in the form of an equal annual dividend check. Most importantly, a revenue-neutral carbon tax would reduce carbon emissions at a lower cost than today's arbitrary and complex regulatory limits. Winners and losers wouldn't depend on being politically connected. They would be determined by who uses or saves the most carbon.
Okay, can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Shay.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so like the video was saying, that explained the carbon tax. And so it's a good introduction for the concept of the bill that I'm going to be talking about soon. And just a little disclaimer, the video calls it a carbon tax. However, I will be talking about a carbon fee and dividend. And we use the word fee because the money is collected by the government, but it's distributed back to the households. So it's revenue neutral. The government does not keep any of the money. And so it's not like called a tax. And I just want to make that distinction. Okay. So for British Columbia is an example of another country who has already put in place a carbon tax, which is very similar to the carbon fee that I was just talking about. And so it's an example of a country that has this in existence and there's evidence of it. And the current price is at $40 per metric ton of CO2, and that was implemented in 2008, but it has increased over the years. And they applied the tax to any use or purchase of fossil fuel products. And the impacts of the carbon tax, they found that it actually encouraged the use of energy efficient vehicles. It did not cause unemployment. It did not hurt low income families. And in 2015, they found that carbon emissions were reduced by 5 to 15%. And somewhat in response to British Columbia's economic success after its introduction of the carbon tax, and to the country's commitment to the Paris Agreement, Canada implemented a nationwide carbon tax in 2019, starting at $20 per ton of CO2, which will increase by $10 each year until it reaches $50 per ton of CO2 in 2022. So provinces like British Columbia, who already have the tax, don't have to implement this, but the entirety of Canada has some form of a carbon tax. Okay, so now for the bill that has been in the United States Congress that Citizens Climate Lobby supports and is really excited about for 2021. Are you ready for a big bipartisan solution to climate change? So the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops released this statement on the reintroduction of the bill. This bipartisan bill is a hopeful sign that more and more climate change is beginning to be seen as a crucial moral issue, one that concerns all people. At a time when the dangerous effects of climate change are becoming increasingly apparent, the need for legislative solutions like this is more urgent than ever. So the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act has the most support in Congress than any other carbon pricing bill ever, with 86 co-sponsors, including North Carolina's very own Representative David Price and Alma Adams. CCL works across the aisle as well to gain support for this bipartisan bill. So let's take another look at this idea called the carbon fee and dividend, which aligns closely with Energy Innovation Act. The bill says that those businesses that put coal or oil out of the ground will have to pay a fee. And over time, the fee will be higher and higher. So let's say that this is a coal company here. This company will have to pay the fee to the government for producing this coal. So we say that it's putting a price on carbon. Up until now, these companies haven't had to pay for the carbon pollution that they're putting into the air.
So the government takes the money from this company and many other companies doing the same thing. Now the government could use the money to build some new roads or go to war or try to clean up some rivers or anything else that the government would want to use with it. That would be called a tax, but this is a fee. And under this law, the government can't spend it. All the government can do is give it to the people. So the money is divided up equally and sent to households across the country. This is called the dividend. So let's keep following the money. The coal company is going to increase their prices to offset the fee. In the meantime, the technology for wind and solar power is actually getting less expensive. And there is no fee on wind and solar power. So in comparison, the price of electricity goes up and the price of wind and solar goes down. More and more businesses and individuals alike will switch over to cleaner energy because it will be cheaper than dirty energy. And that's a good thing for the climate. So what is going to happen to things like gasoline or anything made of plastic, which comes from oil, is that the sellers will raise the price. And this is where the dividend comes in. So the dividend is there to help families to be able to pay for the higher cost of things. More money goes out, but more money also comes in. This money is in your pocket and you can spend it in any way that you want. And that sounds nice, doesn't it? If you suddenly had a little extra money in your pocket, what would you spend it on? So what if you took the money and bought a brand new bicycle? That way you may be able to save on gasoline, which is of course much better for the environment, and you don't have to pay as much in higher gas prices. Or what if you save this money and put solar panels on the roof of your home? You'd be saving lots of money there and bringing down your carbon footprint. So that is how the carbon fee and dividend works. As far as Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act works, it is exactly that, with a fee placed on fossil fuel producers. The polluters pay, not the consumers, and this is a steadily rising fee starting at $15 per ton of carbon dioxide, and it increases by $10 per ton of carbon dioxide every year. So it's steadily increasing. And this ensures that emissions are reduced. The polluters charged by this bill may pass on the cost to consumers, which is offset by the dividend because the money made from the fee is distributed evenly to each American household. And there are other provisions under this bill, including the carbon adjustment, border adjustment, which means that imported goods will be subject to the same fee at the border. There's also a limited regulatory adjustment. That means that there will be a narrow regulatory pause on only the greenhouse effect of CO2 for 10 years. This avoids doubling up on penalties. It gives the policy a chance to meet its ambitious targets, and it provides predictability to businesses so that they can plan a change. If the targets aren't met after 10 years, this legislation makes sure those regulations snap back in full force after an evaluation. If you have any questions about the bill or how it works or need any clarification, feel free to ask at the end. This law meets our criteria for large-scale change through incentives that are fair for a livable, healthy planet. Its benefits include that it is effective, good for the people, good for the economy, bipartisan, and revenue neutral. So let's dive a little deeper into these benefits. If we continued business as usual, there would be no change in emissions in the US, and we would not meet the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change guidelines to stay within 2 and 1.5 degrees Celsius required to rein in on climate change. The Energy Innovation Act will reduce emissions by 90% by year 2050. The Clean Power Plan, in comparison, would only reduce emissions by 3%. The Paris Agreement would reduce emissions, but only until 2025. The Energy Innovation Act sets targets till 2050. Another major benefit of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is that it is good for the economy. This policy will create 2.1 million additional jobs in local communities across America, thanks to local economic growth. And I think another reason why it's good for the economy is because there are maybe some fiscal benefits or benefits that earn our government money that are not as noticeable. And those include that if our fossil fuel usage is down and we are reducing emissions, then we will reduce the cost that climate change is having on our economy, such as the $240 billion in annual costs from environmental and health harms of fossil fuels. Many economists agree that carbon fee and dividends are simple, comprehensive, and effective. In fact, 3,589 economists have all signed a public statement saying that carbon fee and dividend is effective economically and will reduce carbon emissions. This comes from a statement made by the Climate Leadership Council that was published in the Wall Street Journal. Next, the Energy Innovation Act is good for the people. This policy will improve health and save lives by reducing pollution that Americans breathe. Additionally, the carbon dividend puts money directly into people's pockets every month to spend as they see fit, helping low and middle income Americans. A dividend like this could help people out who are being negatively affected by the pandemic during this time to receive a monthly dividend. We've also seen during this time how much of an impact air pollution can have on people's health and their increased risk factor of becoming ill due to other diseases such as COVID-19. If we can reduce air pollution, then less people will be at greater risk to suffer from COVID-19. Under this policy, Columbia University's modeling finds that in the power sector, sulfur dioxide and mercury emissions would be reduced by over 95%, and emissions of nitrogen oxides would be reduced by 75% in 2030 compared to current policy. Reducing air pollutants can significantly reduce morbidity and mortality. Another benefit of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is that it is revenue neutral, which basically means that even though the government is charging money, they do not keep any of that money. It goes back to the households. And since the government will not keep any of the money, the size of the government does not grow. This graph is from the most recent study that Citizens Climate Lobby commissioned, and it is on how this bill will affect American households. And it shows the cost of a carbon fee compared to the dividend benefit. It compares households by their carbon footprint. Those with the lowest carbon footprint will have a net benefit. They receive a dividend amount that is greater than what they pay in energy costs. So the less carbon you emit, the more net benefit you receive under this policy. The last benefit is bipartisanship. The reason this bill being bipartisan is good is because climate change is urgent. If the bill has support from both parties, the bill is popular, it is not only more likely to get approved by Congress, but is also less likely to be repealed and rolled back after a new change in leadership. The Evangelical Environmental Network said about the bill, "We support the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act and other carbon pricing proposals, and will work with the bill's sponsors to ensure that pollution reductions are achieved while those of lower economic means are not adversely impacted. It's time for bipartisan action to reduce carbon pollution. It's time for America to assume once again its leadership in defending our children." So I have another multiple choice question, but during whose presidency was the first ever Earth Day celebrated? That's Richard Nixon. For the sake of time, I'll do that fast. So what are you hopeful for in 2021? What are your personal goals regarding climate? What action on climate change would you like to see? Please share your responses in the chat. So how can we get this bill passed in 2021? With 2021, there is a new Congress and new president. Biden has prioritized climate change as an important issue. Democrats have control of the House, and Vice President Harris breaks the tie of the 50-50 Senate. John Kerry, the appointed climate envoy, says that one of the most significant ways that we can address climate change is through carbon pricing. This marks the clearest signal yet to influence economic behavior. It is very significant that Biden's administration supports carbon pricing, which increases the likelihood of the Energy Innovation Act passing. It is important, however, that we still seek bipartisanship and work across the aisle. We must note that what our current president does can be undone by the next, so we need durable legislation that passes Congress. Even though the Democrats have control of both chambers, we still need support from Republicans to ensure that it passes. Our original sponsor, Representative Deutsch, will reintroduce the Energy Innovation Act early this year and with a Republican. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is the most popular carbon pricing bill with 86 co-sponsors, and we are increasing support from Republicans. As from my own experience of speaking with Republican elected leaders, many look to market-based approaches that work with their economy to reduce emissions, such as the Energy Innovation Act. So in order for legislation to be enacted, it has to have political will. Political will is our abilities as constituents to influence what happens in Congress. So the question then is, how do we build political will to act on climate? What can you do to support the Energy Innovation Act? You can contact Congress. Writing or calling Congress are easy, effective ways to create waves in the legislature. Your representatives want to hear your voice of support for the bill, and Citizens Climate Lobby has a great tool on their website with an email template and representative finder to make it even easier. So you can go to cclusa.org/write to write a letter to your member of Congress, or you can go to cclusa.org/call Congress to call them. And you can also go to your representative's website to directly contact them from there. So CCL also has 5 levers of political will to maximize the influence that we volunteers foster. CCL chapters across the country utilize these. So they allow volunteers to be engaged and become involved in a variety of different ways. There's something for everyone. You'd like to speak, table at events, talk to community leaders, etc. You can do that with Citizens Climate Lobby. There are so many ways that you can really take action. And if you'd like more information about CCL and what you can do as a volunteer with us, CCL hosts weekly live information sessions on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can go to cclusa.org/intro to register for that. If you'd like more information on the Energy Innovation Act, you can go to energyinnovationact.org, and we can also answer any questions that you have in the Q&A session. So last, I want to thank the Interfaith Creation Care of the Triangle for having me, and thank you everyone for being here. My email is shay.reinberg@gmail.com, and if you'd like to contact me about anything concerning this presentation or anything else, you can contact me there. And the Triangle Youth Team has an Instagram account at CDL-RDU Youth. And with that, I will stop screen sharing.
Well, Shay, thanks so much. That was a great presentation. Really enlightening. And I think may be new to many folks here. Okay, so we're going to open it up now for questions. And what we'll do to start is I will pick some of the questions out of the chat and pass them on. And either Shay or Don can dive in here. So let me see, the first one I wanted to pass on was Melinda Latta has said, isn't Norway doing this? It would be great to hear how this is being implemented elsewhere and how it's worked. She loves the idea. Either Don or
Shay, do you want to take that one or you want me to?
You can take this one.
All right, cool. So yeah, great question. Norway has implemented something similar, as has a lot of Europe. There are actually over 38 countries that have implemented some type of carbon pricing mechanism that is kind of within this scheme. The only country that has done something similar in terms of the rate of increase and the return back to individuals is Canada. And that still is only a few different provinces, and their rate of increase is not as fast as what we're proposing. So while a lot of countries have priced carbon kind of in this fashion, what we're proposing is by far and away the most ambitious of anything in the world.
Okay, thanks. Lynn Lau asks, can you give some examples of the regulations that would be paused for 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we're doing is we're pausing any future regulations on CO2 emissions specifically over the next decade. So it doesn't repeal any current regulations, and it doesn't stop any regulations that are currently in effect. So all the regulatory options that are there still hold. And it still allows for legislation to prevent anything else related to burning fossil fuels. That could be carbon dioxide, or it could be carbon monoxide, it could be mercury, it could be sulfates, SOx, NOx, anything like that is still fair game. We're basically saying there are two ways to address any type of issue. You can either do it regulatorily or you can do it through a pricing scheme. And so the pricing scheme is the regulation in this case, and we're saying we want to give 10 years for this pricing scheme to work. And if it doesn't, then we mandate that the EPA add additional regulation that no longer exists. So basically what we're saying is we're going to put a price on, and then at the end of 10 years, if we haven't achieved the goals that are laid out in the bill, and we haven't achieved that 90% reduction, then we're going to say, all right, more regulation is needed, and we mandate that it occurs.
Yeah, Donna, I'm just going to dive in here and take the moderator's prerogative and follow up on that because I understand the logic there, but the IPCC has said that the next 10 years are critical to making sure that we don't head towards a tipping point with, and so do you think that the 10-year pause, we could be over the tipping point by the time we snap back these and change? What do you say to that?
Yeah, great point, Russ. And we're on the line. We're riding it right now. And so the reason why I think this makes sense is because we are going to reduce emissions faster than any other regulatory policy. Even the Clean Power Plan, as Shay pointed out, would only reduce our emissions 3% over the next 10 years. With this, we're going to hit a 40% reduction over 12 years, about 34% over 10. So this policy is by far and away the most aggressive way for us to bring our emissions down. So I think the compromise here is this allows us to have a bipartisan conversation, create a durable solution that will be able to last for the 30 years we're going to need this legislation in place. And it is still more aggressive and reduces our emissions faster than any current regulatory bill in Congress.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Yeah.
We have, prior to the meeting, we've had Joe Burton reach out to us. He would like to ask a question about the way the military is treated under this bill. And is Joe on the call? Can you unmute yourself? I would think you'd be the best to ask your question. Is Joe there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I saw what's the number on this bill? Is it HR
763?
763?
Yep.
What if there isn't as I understand, there is an exemption for agriculture and the military. And can you explain that?
Yes, correct. Thank you, Joe. That's a great question. So we do exempt agricultural diesel fuel. So for those of you that have been on farms, which I'll bet many of you have, being in North Carolina, it's the diesel is actually dyed red. So red dyed diesel is exempt from this fee, as is fuel for the military. And we do that for a couple of different reasons. First off, farmers really take it on the chin. You know, they buy retail and sell wholesale, and that's a problem with the Farm Bill, and we really need to look at agriculture more comprehensively. But to remove that is, I think, a fair way to do it. That red dyed diesel is already exempt from federal excise taxes and highway taxes, and it only accounts for about 0.8% of our total emissions. Same thing with the military. The military exists outside of the market, the way that we all consume goods. And so it makes sense to exempt the military as well. And they account for about 1.2% of our total emissions. So the way the bill is currently written is we're exempting 2% of all US emissions by doing this. And in doing so, it allows us to have conversations with folks that otherwise would be completely opposed to this type of legislation. So I think that this is a fair compromise that still allows us to meet our climate goals while opening the conversation to build that political will we need to move it forward.
How does it help me? How does it help me not buy a gas guzzling automobile, for instance?
Yeah, totally. So
how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So we know that the higher the price of gasoline, the more demand there is for fuel efficient vehicles. And we saw this in 2007 and 8 when we were looking at $4 a gallon gasoline. And so when we saw those high gasoline prices, we saw SUV sales plummet and we saw fuel efficient vehicles spike. And so people respond to those type of price signals. And more importantly, what we're looking at is an opportunity to really address this in a very simple way. I got two pens here. It's like one of them is made with fossil fuels, this one. One of them is made with renewable energy. Now, right now, this one with renewable energy costs a little bit more. It's more expensive, right? Now, if we make this pen get more and more expensive because it's using fossil fuels, and this pen stays the same, I'm going in and I'm making a purchase of the same product. The only difference is one is significantly cheaper. And so now what we're doing is making it so every choice we make, every purchase we make becomes an environmental choice, becomes a pro-climate choice, because the true cost of the product is reflected in its price.
Okay, that's good. That helps a lot. The thing with the military, and I can understand the percentage, but there's such a huge it has such a huge carbon footprint. Percentage-wise, I guess you can look at it that way. But since the global war on terror started, it has produced 1.2 billion metric tons of greenhouse gas. And I don't know, I guess what you're looking, and that's double how much the cars in the United States produced. So I think that's something that's is troubling to me, but I suppose what you're thinking is that will be addressed in some other way.
Right, exactly. Now, to be fair, the military, the Pentagon, has been one of our biggest advocates. Fort Bragg has put solar thermal heating on all their barracks. Camp Lejeune has done solar, has installed PV all across their campus. So the military is moving towards renewables. In fact, they're way ahead of the civilian sector. So I think that their ability to transition away is going to move much quicker because they look at it as simply it's a numbers game for them. So
Right.
It's like we make the numbers work and ta-da.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Great question.
Thanks, Joe. We have a question here from, let me find it again. Stephen Hawley asked a couple of questions that seem to be related. Says he likes the idea of a consistent, predictable price change. He'd like to see some of that money go to research on energy innovation and efficiency. And then he also notes that the dollars per ton that you're talking about, by his calculations, seem to amount to about 15 cents a gallon. And I guess, those two kind of go together, and just react to his observations about should we take this money and invest it in research. And I guess part of that question might be, is 15, is this enough to change behavior, particularly in transportation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been running my mouth for a while. Shay, would you like to take that one?
Sure. John, feel free to,
I muted the wrong the wrong device. Okay, that's better. So feel free to correct me. I believe it is a penny per dollar per ton, if that's the equivalent. So that's correct. And about his point about whether or not we should switch it to renewable energy or research, that was actually when I first joined CCL, that was one of the first questions I thought as well. About that is that the dividend creates, it's equal, it's submitted to every American household. And so that way it's revenue neutral. If we submitted it to research, then the size of the government would grow. It would no longer be revenue neutral. And so having that equal dividend makes it equal, and then households will be able to spend that on whatever they choose to see fit. And so that'll help with economic growth. And we do see the incentive as enough because it steadily rises every year. So we don't want it to immediately, gas prices to immediately jump a lot, because that's only going to have worse effects than it is going to have good. So we're having it increase steadily so that it is predictable and people are able to make those choices, but not at a higher cost. And the dividend will offset those prices that are increasing due to the fee.
Yeah, that's great, Shay. That's perfect. Yeah, I mean the whole gamut here is, we start at $15 per ton. That's 15 cents. Doesn't make too much of a difference. Hurricane comes through, we'll see 15-cent drop, rise. It happens. But when it's 15 cents, then 30 cents, then 45, then 60. It's like, and it's just going to keep getting more and more. Then that's what moves economic behavior. So yeah, great. Thank you, Shay.
Well, thanks. Now I'm going to combine a couple of questions that are somewhat related, at least in my mind. Elise Strevel is asking, when do you think Congress will take action on this bill? And Lynn wants to know, what is the Biden administration's position on this? And how does that relate to Biden's pledge to grow green infrastructure and jobs?
Shay, you want to tackle any of those?
So what I addressed in my presentation actually came from what Don has told our chapter about the coming up in 2021. So as far as when they are going to take action on it, we are hoping that the bill will be reintroduced within the next couple of months. And then after that, it goes through the same process. And we are confident that we have the chance to get it passed through both chambers and up to the president by 2021. And as far as what Biden's administration is prioritizing, climate change is one of those, and carbon pricing is also already popular and already a supported method of climate policy by John Kerry, the climate envoy. And so yeah, Don, if you'd like to add on to that.
Yeah, that's perfect, Shay. I think the only thing that I'll add is just kind of a quick refresher on how a bill gets passed, because I'm betting it's been a while since y'all have seen Schoolhouse Rock. So we gotta get our bill reintroduced in the House, and then hopefully reintroduced in the Senate at the same time, and then we'll move the bills concurrently through the houses. They get introduced. They get referred to 3 different committees. And then in each committee, they can be changed and marked up. And then they got to pass out of each of those 3 committees. Once they get out of those committees, if they pass through all 3 committees with the same language, then it goes to the floor. And we're confident now with Schumer and Pelosi that the bills will come to the floor for a vote, which is great. So we'll get a vote in the House on a version. We'll get a vote in the Senate on a version. Chances are they will not have the same language. So the House and Senate will conference, They'll work out the language. Then it goes back to the full House, goes back to the full Senate. We need to overcome a filibuster in the Senate, which means we need at least 10 Republicans, assuming all Democrats are with us, which is not a guarantee. So we really need 12 to 15 Republicans to move this forward. Everything agrees. Then it goes to Biden's desk and he puts his name on it. And we got to do all that in 18 months. So we got our work cut out for us. But I definitely think that that is possible. And we're looking forward to reintroduction here really soon.
Great, Don. And can I just ask, is the bill that's going to be reintroduced, is it the exact same bill? Has there been any changes?
I don't know of any changes. We're not anticipating any changes, and we do expect it to be the same bill name. It'll be a different bill number, but the details could change. I don't know. I wish I could give you a date. I really wish Representative Deutsch would give me a call and say, this is exactly what we're doing. But he is yet to ring my phone. I don't know. Maybe I should have asked him for coffee. I don't know.
Okay. Okay, we've got a little more time here. We've got a question from Gary Smith, which is asking, would CCL support a bill that keeps some of the money to cover costs?
Yes. Oh, so that's a great question. So the cost of implementation is actually already written into the bill. So we will have to, we say that it is revenue neutral. That is mostly true. The first year, we're going to lose about 8% to administrative costs in terms of setup, making sure we get the dividend back to people, and the necessary IRS infrastructure to get that dividend back to people. Now, I think that 8% is probably a little high now, considering that we've done 2 rounds of direct payments for stimulus. So we've seen that infrastructure already exists. So we're expecting actually a little less than that. And then every year that will become more and more efficient, where we pan out at about 3% to cover the administrative costs of running the program. So we anticipate within 5 years, in fact, the bill specifically states that within 5 years, the cost of running the bill will only be 3%. So we'll be returning 97% of the revenue.
Okay. And Donna Doran asks about the objections of the Democrats in Congress. Donna, do you want to unmute yourself and make sure we've got your question correct?
Yeah, sorry, I was typing kind of fast. I was just curious when you said that we may not get all the Dems on a bill. So in particular, I mean, I'd be interested in other objections as well, but I'm particularly interested in what the Democratic objections might be.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we've got to be aware of the Joe Manchins and the John Testers of the world, right? It's like our Democratic friends in West Virginia and Montana, where the majority of their economic income for their state is coal production. Those are fair concerns, and so we can't count on those votes, right? Now it's like we've got to make sure that they understand the value of this, and that that they're willing to jump on. Now, I don't see them supporting this legislation without a significant number of Republicans. But that's fine, because we need Republicans anyway in the Senate. Now, in the House, we can move this with 100% Democratic support. We don't need a Republican in theory. However, bringing on 24 Republicans onto this bill in the House will make our case easier in the Senate, because we can't move legislation without Republicans in the Senate. So we know we need at least 10. A little bit more gives us a little wiggle room. But there are political concerns and economic concerns in supporting this by certain Democrats, specifically John Tester and Senator Manchin, which are fair. And even so, I've spent a fair amount of time in coal country, in West Virginia, in Kentucky, talking with coal mining families. And it's a mixed bag. Like, some folks think it's totally worth it because, I mean, they all hate working in the coal mines. Every single coal miner I've ever talked to hates doing it. And there is a sense of pride in doing it, which I totally understand. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge those concerns and point to the fact that we can provide a better economic and health outcome for everyone in doing this. So yeah, it's a bit of a fine line to walk, but because of the rules of the Senate, I think we can overcome any Democratic concerns.
And okay, we've got about 5 more minutes. I have a follow-up question on that, but I'm not going to dominate this because we have a question from John Reese, who asks, at approximately 90 cents a gallon increase in gas, I think what he's calculating out of this, is it realistic to expect we'll get large decreases in emissions? Is 90 cents enough, basically?
Yeah, I mean, we will absolutely see a decrease in emissions, and it doesn't just stop there. And transportation accounts for about a third of our total CO2 output, a quarter to a third. And so the other thing here is we're hitting the entire economy with this. And so yes, we will see a decrease in transportation emissions at an increase of 90 cents, which just a back of the napkin. That'll take about 6 years for us to get there. So we do anticipate to see a decrease in the transportation sector. More importantly, we anticipate to see a shift in the manufacturing sector and a shift in the utility sector. And that's where we see also a lot of big gains because companies like Duke will be forced to move. And right now, Duke Energy, they make the choice that makes the most sense for their consumers from a financial standpoint. And it's like coal is cheap, natural gas is cheap, which is why 50% of our energy in the Carolinas comes from coal and natural gas. And so if we make coal and natural gas more expensive and the price parity for wind and solar drops, then that's where they're going to put their money because that's where they're regulated to put their money. So there's the Utility Commission in North Carolina prioritizes cost to consumers first above anything else. And so there are important benefits to that. I mean, a lot of people struggle to pay their electric bill as is, struggle to pay their heat. So I think that is not misguided. We just need to change the economics. We need to make sure that the economic choice is the environmental choice.
Okay, thanks, Don. Well, we've got, we had an early question, and Don, this is actually not for you. This is for Amin, and it's a little housekeeping thing, but I didn't want to neglect it. Portia, is Amin still with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. And Portia Rochelle wants to know, what is the date for the Zoom meeting on the watershed?
I'll put it in the chat, but it's going to be February 27th through April 10th, I believe, but I'll try and stick it in the chat. We've actually reached our maximum number of participants, but we're deciding whether to open it up to others.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, so I guess I think I've covered all of the questions in the chat. And I think we're about 2 minutes ahead of schedule. So I think nobody would argue with being slightly ahead of schedule on a Zoom meeting. So Don and Shay, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone for coming here tonight. I think this has been a real help in everyone's understanding. And I want to then tap Jim Galloway, who's going to give us our closing prayer and reflection. So, Jim?
Let us give thanks. We give thanks for nature, for its harmonic, interworking, and dynamic development. We give thanks to the source of all life. May we live with an attitude of gratitude. We give thanks for truth, for our wisdom and our human powers of observation and reason. We give thanks to the source of all truth. May we use our newest learning now radically to restore our natural world to healthy harmony of climate. Yet may we always remember ancient wisdom to avoid new exploitation of our world and to live in it humbly as sisters and brothers of all creatures, non-human as well as human. Secure in our confidence in the reality of truth, goodness, and natural beauty, let us choose freely to love our natural world as its creator loves it, and keep it in trust for future generations. Let us persevere in hope and courage. May we not grow weary in well-doing or paralyzed by the shortness of time left to address the climate crisis. We have been given minds and voices and hands to meet the crisis, even at the 11th hour. So let us rest well tonight and work hard tomorrow in strong hope. May it be so. Amen.
Amen. Well, I want to thank everyone again for coming tonight, and again, we'll be putting out notices on future meetings and on our website. And I encourage you to visit our website to see several of the plans that we've got for this year. And once again, have a great evening. Thanks to everyone. Good night.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good night.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Thank you, everybody.
Great job.